wanna give up, fall down, I just gotta get up, hey. Yeah, this is my road, lights, camera, action, I'm ready to go. Been way too long, we faced them storms, now you gon' face the dawn you waited for. I said from night to dawn, I right my wrongs alone, in competition with warnings.
You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show on WNHH LP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio.
Harry, I love to hear that when you intro the show and that deep melodious and bass voice. If you say Jonathan that he'd be a alto or a tenor or a bass, just based on his voice.
Maybe just a lyric baritone.
A lyric baritone. There you go. And that's why we have Jonathan Q Berryman on the show. Quinn, can I share your middle name with folks?
Of course.
Jonathan Quinn Berryman, and I know Jonathan in a variety of hats. The hat that I just love so much is, I love all the hats that he wears, but as the founder of the New Haven Heritage Chorale and just celebrated their 20th anniversary, he's been bringing harmony to New Haven for 2 decades. But he's also been bringing harmony to the New Haven public school system for over two decades. And I don't say that metaphorically, from a realistic, substantive, and stylistic, as well as symbolic, and all those kind of good things. But from a real deal standpoint, how do you create harmony in school systems so you can have a learning environment and a nurturing environment and an inspirational environment? So Jonathan's going to talk about that a little bit in the context of school uniforms. Again, in the context of school uniforms. So there's so many parts, I think, of an educational environment in terms of the structure, the books, the infrastructure, the teacher quality, the student quality, the community quality. But also there's this thing called student uniforms, which has had a impact on how we kind of think of how the factories of education, or the incubators of education, or the innovation spots of education. So Jonathan Q. Berryman is here. We got started a little late, and I apologize for that. Harry and I, the station manager, were chatting about the computer kind of taking over the world, so the computer was kind of being a little cranky this morning. I'm not sure whether it's had its coffee or not. But we're here, we're live, we're ready to go. Jonathan Q. Berryman is with us, New Haven Public School educator, administrator for over 20 years. And I want to quick to say that before Jonathan speaks, that his views are solely and exclusively and do not reflect the public school system. So I hope you have a job when you leave here. Will they still let you? Will the doors be barricaded, or will they let you back into to your school when you leave here? We hope that the doors will be open.
And they'll be open.
They'll be, amen. Lift it, name and claim it. So, Jonathan, let's talk about school uniforms. We're going to talk about the policies, the practices, the legislation, what parents can do. We have about 45 minutes, and we're not going to go quickly. We're going to just take our time and wade through this, and we might even have to maybe even ask him to come back once the next school year starts up in September. But school uniforms, give us some context on why we're here today.
Well, Tom, this morning's show actually began as an assignment at SCSU in a class that I'm taking as I work toward my doctoral studies.
Excellent.
And I really just...
It's at Sacred Southern Connecticut State University?
Southern Connecticut.
Okay. I
am now officially an owl.
All right, there you go. And you were a Princeton Tiger in previous lives,
and a Yale Eli,
and a Yale Bulldog in earlier lives, etc. So
Sacred Heart. I don't know what their mascot is.
The
actually.
Pioneers, I think.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I let me just start with what the focus of this study was. The study looked at the use of school uniforms in what we call Derg-I and their contiguous towns. The Derg-I cities tend to be the larger, less affluent cities in Connecticut. So those cities are Bridgeport, Hartford, New Britain, New Haven, and Waterbury.
And how did that classification come up? How did they get that, I won't say stereotype, but how were they kind of categorized in that fashion? Why was there a need to kind of even to have that kind of rubric or acronym or category for these particular school systems?
So the finance board pretty much looks at determined that they divided the state into districts or DERGs, district reference groups.
Okay.
Often, and one of the primary ways that they categorize DERGs is by average median household income.
Okay. So there's an assumption that income kind of influences educational outcomes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's how it started. And so Derg A would be the wealthiest Derg, where the average median household income is around $198,000 a year. And then Derg I, which are the districts that I looked at, the average median household income is somewhere around 35,000.
So the Greenwich people wear Gucci and we wear All Stars, or no? We'll get to that in a second. Go ahead, continue.
So and I'll start with I'll just start right into the focus of it. There are 5 things that really come to mind this morning.
Great.
Number 1, the implementation of public school uniforms in Connecticut has indeed created a separate and unequal policy that clearly marks the difference between the haves and the have-nots, and that also has class and race overtones.
So this is a policy or a discretionary thing? It can be implemented case-by-case basis?
So the Connecticut statute actually grants individual school boards and regional school boards the power to determine a uniform for students. So some districts have taken advantage of that, and others have left it alone. So in comparing Connecticut's large inner city districts with the towns around them, it has become clear that districts that are wealthy and primarily white allow their students great freedom in dressing themselves, while the districts where the residents live closer to the poverty line and student populations are approximately 80% black and Hispanic confine their students to mandated uniforms. So
the local school board, say, in school board in Hamden has a different policy than the school board in New Haven.
Absolutely. The Hamden dress code doesn't mention uniforms at all.
Okay.
The scientifically based research on public school uniforms predominantly concludes that public school uniforms have little to no positive effect on student achievement nor student climate.
Okay, let's just pause there for a second. In New Haven, roughly what percentage of our schools have school uniform policies?
That's a good question because it's not reported on our website.
Okay, your anecdotal, would you say roughly 20%? I won't hold you out. We don't have a fact checker. Harry's not a fact checker at the moment. He's the
so it's a valid question because I looked for the data somewhere.
But there
on
are
our
some
website.
schools, though.
There are. So the way the policy reads in New Haven is if your school mandates a uniform, then the students in that school have to wear it.
Okay. And as we speak, we're comfortable in saying that today there's some students that went to school that had to wear the uniform.
Absolutely.
In New Haven. All
Absolutely.
Right? Okay.
There are some. So New Haven has a variably mandatory policy, which means some schools have uniforms and some schools don't.
Okay. All right.
And even the enforcement at the schools that do have uniforms varies.
And you're referencing that your research, again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jonathan Quinn Berryman is with us. Your research kind of illustrates some disparities or different outcomes or impact?
So the studies that have been done on public school uniforms and their significance generally indicate that public school uniforms make no difference in the bottom line of a school's goals.
Are they harmful?
They have not indicated that they're harmful, but
not helpful.
They're not helpful. And if they're not helpful,
they're not helpful.
If it's not helpful, why are you trying to enforce
if
a
it
policy?
Quacks like a duck? To me, Jonathan, if it quacks, I apologize for being so taking maybe liberties with the show, but I mean, if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck.
So the challenge in this is the amount of administrative and teacher time that goes into enforcing a uniform policy. That then a uniform policy that produces no real positive results is a waste of time.
Sure. So over 20 years you've spent in the school system. So I mean, I want people to know that this is not just an academic research paper or a task for you to complete so you can move up the ladder because you're already obviously very, very credentialed. But this is something near and dear to your heart. I mean, you see some negative impact of this policy as it is applied.
Well, a good part of it has to do with freedom. Why should we take away a parental responsibility and freedom to determine what is appropriate for their household?
Okay.
When it really makes no impact
that's right.
in a child's learning.
So they have to purchase. That's right. They have to purchase.
Well, they have to purchase.
Yeah.
Well, and they have
clean
to clean them and abide by that uniform policy. So for me personally,
as
an educator, it says to me, why should we even bother with a policy that doesn't affect our bottom line of school and teacher and professional accountability? If it's not producing results, let it go.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. So let's move. Let's move through. I mean, just every sentence you utter, just 5 or so other questions come to my mind. I'm trying to hold my mule. Trying to hold my mule here because this is just you're unpacking some things that I don't think our listeners are kind of aware of. So continue, please.
So that's why I say, with the research in mind, I urge all stakeholders, parents, students, teachers, administrators, community members, and boards of education to reevaluate these uniform dress code policies and to ask themselves and others, why are we supporting policies that limit student and parent freedoms when they produce no real results? And then where is the scientific research? Not anecdotes, not personal stories, but scientific research that suggests that school uniforms are a good idea.
So you've seen me with, I mentioned the various hats that you wear, and you've seen me wearing my various hats. And sometimes when I come to the studio, I'm not sure what hat I'm going to wear until I get into the midst of the ocean here. But not to put you on the spot, but the Board of Education meetings are held twice a month, I guess. So you're suggesting that if a parent wants to kind of pose that question at the next Board of Education meeting, he or she might want to pose that question.
That's within their right as a parent.
Okay.
And you know, the real question is, what should our community engagement be in really looking at this issue and bringing some resolution to it?
Okay, tell us about that then. What should it be?
One, you know, I believe everything starts at the school level.
Okay.
That, you know, that all stakeholders engage each other. That there needs to be a conversation around this uniform concept, and now asking ourselves, is this worth it? Certainly, the Supreme Court has not heard a case on school uniforms. It is all of the lower courts have made most of the decisions about school dress policies and uniform issues in recent years. So there's always the issue of, to what extent are school uniforms an overreach of government? And for me, if they produce no real positive results, then it's an overreach.
Okay. Let's kick it up even to the state level. In terms of the state, we talk about local boards of education, but we often forget about there's something called our state Board of Education. Should this be a topic for the State Board of Education to revisit?
Well, it absolutely should be. The State Board of Education doesn't even collect data on what schools wear uniforms. So there are implementation issues that they may not even know about.
And are you saying that they're on paper they're supposed to be collecting data, or it's just they don't have enough resources for it, or it's just
they have, not that they're supposed to, but they don't collect the data.
Don't collect the data, so they don't. Oh,
so they don't. So there are things happening that they don't know about because they don't ask for that data.
I'm not going to mention any State Board of Education members that I know, but you can look those up, and I might kind of text one and some previous ones. I will mention Walt Esdale. Walt is no longer a member of the State Board of Education, but Walt was a member for a few years. And there are people, there are retired administrators here that listen to the show that know me, that know you, and there's a role for, if you're an administrator, retired in particular, to kind of still dust off your shoes sometimes and still get involved. There's room to kind of to wield your influence. But I don't want to distract you. Please, let's continue.
And I will say that one of the things that Southern instills in its students is this idea of advocacy. What is our role in shaping public policy? What is our role in dealing with issues of social equity? So and not only Southern, but it's something that's been instilled in me over the years through parents and ancestry. So I need to put that out there.
Sure.
I also need to mention that there are some delimitations to this study.
No, watch these SAT words. I know that this is graduate commencement day and graduate class of 2018. I know you're trying to get some brownie points, but delimitation. Can you paraphrase that for me?
So there's some things that this study does not include.
Okay.
It doesn't touch. It doesn't mention at all. And mostly because for this particular study, they're not relevant.
Okay.
So this study does not talk about the way that public school uniforms are used in the Caribbean or the British school systems, because in those systems, all students wear uniforms, regardless of class, ethnicity. It matters not. If you go to a public school in Jamaica, you wear a uniform, and that's non-negotiable. So that's not the case in public schools in Connecticut,
okay,
where some students wear uniforms and others do not, even in public schools.
Indeed.
It does not talk about the way that private schools use uniforms.
That's right. I forget about fire. Yeah,
Because private school, parents and families elect to send their students to private schools, and they pay out of pocket. That's not the case with public schools, where schools are funded by taxpayer dollars. And with a shout out to Jeffrey Frazier, it does not talk about how uniforms were used back in the day at Helene Grant. That work was done in a different era of education. This study specifically addresses the current use of public school uniforms in 2018, where we have improved measures of evaluating teacher, administrator, and school accountability, and where there's a greater focus on social emotional learning and providing wraparound services for students and families. So we are in a different day. I want to make that very clear. The work that Jeffrey Frazier did was legendary and still continues to be considered great work. I'm not talking about that.
Absolutely. In fact, I saw Jeffy on Saturday, The Perfect Blend. She's one of the Perfect Blend legends, Jeanette Sykes' initiative, and Jeanette Sykes and her crew. And saw Jeffy, and it's just my mind goes back to the trip she took in terms of taking young people to Africa and the choir that
Absolutely.
That you kind of and I'm glad you referenced Jeffy just as a point about that. There's a fluid nature to what education is. Education is also impacted by our culture and our economy and our politics and everything. So we really got to be on top of things. You listen to the Tom Ficklin Show, and again, we're talking about school uniforms. And you might say, well, why aren't we talking about achievement gaps, or why aren't we talking about bullying in schools, or why aren't we talking about it seems like every four weeks we have a shooting taking place in the school. But school uniforms also can have, we want to look at the whole galaxy of what our educational environment and infrastructure is about. And Jonathan Berryman is with us. Jonathan has spent over two decades in the New Haven public school system. So I want to try to rephrase my question again. Why is this personally kind of important to you? Do you see, because you've been in the midst of, you're working out one of the middle schools, I believe, or elementary schools.
Pre-K through 8.
Pre-K through 8, and the name of it, if you're willing to share.
Barnard.
At Barnard.
Barnard and Environmental Studies Magnet School.
All right, and you were at
Betsy Ross.
Betsy Ross prior, and where before?
Fairhaven Middle.
Fairhaven Middle. So anywhere prior to that?
Longfellow Elementary in Bridgeport.
So anywhere before that?
Actually, Co-op High School. Part-time for 1 year.
And I want people to know that you're not just talking blowing smoke up our wherever. This is something that you see and you felt and you understand the various points and touch points that impact how students learn and how you create harmony in school. So why is this study important to you?
Well, I should say the study was birthed out of the scientific process. Which is observe, question, hypothesize, experiment / conduct research, analyze, and draw conclusions. So even in New Haven, as we teach our students the scientific process and we become more STEM oriented, I believe we have to model that for our students.
Excellent.
So there were some observations that I had. One, students in the inner city wear uniforms, but students in the wealthy suburbs don't. Item 2, of all the schools I've taught in, I've only worked in one uniform school.
Okay.
And in my opinion, and this is anecdotal, uniforms have never made a difference in whether or not students learn, or whether or not they're going to have issues.
Yes.
Third item.
Okay.
Students resist wearing uniforms. This resistance then leads to disciplinary action that distracts teachers and administrators from their primary task of ensuring that students receive high-quality instruction. It makes no difference to me if a student wears a plaid shirt or a solid shirt, but it makes a difference if you're in a uniform school that insists that should be solid.
Jonathan, I have to. This coming August will be my 3rd year of doing the show, and sometimes I take a strict approach, sometimes a little more loose. For whatever reason, you enable me to be a little looser with my dialogue. If Superintendent Burks came in right now, what would you say to her? What would you recommend or urge her to kind of consider doing or reviewing or exploring?
To significantly look at the dress code policy. And actually, me, the citizen, I'd urge her to do away with it. Do away with the uniforms. Get rid of them. So there are other model dress code policies that don't mention uniforms that still give enough breadth and depth to helping people understand how to present themselves safely and with decency.
Indeed.
And those policies don't tell people exactly what they have to wear. They still give people freedom. My great suggestion is that we move away from this constricting, confining, mandatory uniform policy altogether and go back to giving people the freedom of being able to make choices and how they're going to cover their behinds.
Harry, do you have the buzzer? I'm not sure. He's good. I know. I'm entitled as the host, not going on 3 years, to be a little loose. My guests still have to read, and you got on a suit and tie, but I'm afraid you loosened up your tie a little bit there. But that's okay. That's okay too. Again, you're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show, and Jonathan Berryman is with us. Jonathan has spent over 2 decades in the New Haven public school system, as well as he's referenced Bridgeport. Jonathan, just to kind of, as we take a break and before we go for the next 14 or 15 minutes, your task, if we can chat about your task, when you leave this show, you'll be going to Barnard, and the capacity, the role, what are you doing there? I mean, you're taking, your taxpayers are paying for your money. What's going on for yourself? What are you doing at Barnard? What's your role?
Shout out to Barnard. We are already engaged in this conversation about looking at dress code and uniform policies and going through the evaluation process of what are we doing? Does it make a difference? So kudos to Barnard and to its faculty for being willing to take a look at this and to determine how we're going to grow. And
a shout out to Belinda. Also, Belinda Carberry is retiring, and Belinda's been three decades, right? Three decades plus.
Wow,
4?
I believe it's 43 altogether.
4 plus decades. So Belinda Carberry, shout out to you. But specifically, Jonathan, your role, your title, I want people to kind of know the important, really critical task that you're performing there on a 24/7, well, not 24/7, 365, but daily. Your role, your task, your title.
So the title is Climate Leader. No, I don't bother with the thermostat. Climate in this case refers to how people feel about what they're doing. Is school a positive place to be? And if not, what are we doing to change that?
Yes.
So it really does look at the social and emotional side of all stakeholders, staff and students, and tries to shape a game plan for how we make school a good place to be.
It is so important, and thanks for sharing that. In my mind, it's so important for people to understand that there are people in the school system. That there's the superintendent, the superintendent, but you also have the principals and the assistant principals and folks such as yourself and the teachers and assistants, et cetera, to try to make it a harmonious environment. But your role is so critical because you know that emotions drive the world, whether you're conscious of them or not. So emotions, behavior, we hear about bullying all the time. We hear about these shootings. What just as a sidebar before we get back to the dress code issue, when you read about things like in Parkland or recently in Santa Fe, what kind of comes to your mind when you see these episodes occur so consistently, it seems, in the schools?
So certainly those are issues of concern whenever you see that happening. And once again, shout out to New Haven for the work that we're doing with social and emotional learning and wraparound services, connecting students not only with counseling supports within our buildings, but also in the community. Shout out to Kermit Carolina and his office for the Youth Stat program that really is designed to help connect our students and our families with resources that they might need. The level of trauma that our students see and have gone through is far more significant than I think any of us can ever imagine. And you know, you have to deal with that and work with students as they move through that.
Yes.
And it is more than a task that any one teacher can do. That truly is a systemic concern, both in the school and within the community.
Yes.
So a great shout out to New Haven for the work that New Haven is doing in recognizing that our students have needs.
Yes.
And in doing something about that.
Excellent. Let's go back to because you brought in a lot of cogent and really tangible notes and thoughts that I want people that want to share with folks.
So they were observations. Yes, that's where we left off. And so the observations left me with, well, there was one other observation.
Okay.
The only public institutions that I know that mandate attendance and a uniform are schools and prison. And as we move away from the school to prison pipeline, it makes sense that we would move away from dressing our students like they're on the way there. So there were some questions. Where did the idea of public school uniforms come from?
Yes.
Who in Connecticut wears them? Do they really make any difference in public schools? The research centered on dress code policies of Connecticut's Durg High schools and their contiguous towns, places like New Haven and so looking at New Haven and then Hamden, East Haven, West Haven, Orange, etc. And then also looking at what other research studies have said about the impact of school uniforms in public schools.
Does it? I'm really so glad you've come in. Does it surprise you that even, because it seems to be rather straightforward that this might not be a good thing, even prior to the studies being done? Does it surprise you that it's even still in effect, or is it something that you think is people there aren't the proper advocates and people aren't advocating in the right places and at the right times?
So I think what's surprising is not only is it still in effect, it's a growing trend in large urban, lower income, largely Black and Hispanic areas to mandate uniforms.
Okay, so say some more about that then, because that's I sense a little.
So in 1988, there were only 50 public schools that reported wearing uniforms. Helene Grant being one of them. And now in 2016, 20.4% of the nation's schools reported having some kind of uniform.
So if you were King Superintendent of the United States or the Secretary of Education, you would really be taking a look at this.
Absolutely. So it started with the Clinton administration. So Bill Clinton made this big push towards school uniforms as a way to reduce student conflict and criminal activity. So in 1996, in his State of the Union address, he gave this great big shout out in favor of school uniforms. In February of 1996, the manual on school uniforms was shipped out from the U.S. Department of Education to all boards of ed all over the country. In May of 1996, Connecticut passed the statute that says public schools can mandate a uniform for their students.
Okay.
And it's been growing like the universe since then.
Like a weed, a tumbleweed. You want to cut those weeds down. You want to eradicate, fumigate.
Well, more like ivy. That if you leave it too long, you have to repoint the building when you pull it down.
You threw in one of those SAT words again, repoint. But I'm not going to harass you. I know when you're a Princeton grad. When you get Sacred Heart, Southern Connecticut State University. Where else? Yale. I understand this kind of comes really, really easy to you.
Well, this is more looking at having pulled ivy off a building, and then all the brick and all the mortar comes out. And you say, "Why isn't? Oh no, I've got a problem now."
Yes. So it can really be, if not incestuous, but once something gets embedded, it can really be nefarious in terms of eradicating and replacing and challenging,
right,
and pricey.
Well, exactly. In this case, I think it's a quick fix.
Okay.
You just say we aren't doing that anymore. Part of the premise is freedom.
Okay.
It does not bother me if someone wants to wear a uniform to school.
Okay.
If you want to wear a uniform to school, go right ahead and do it. What bothers me is for someone to tell you you have to wear a uniform to school when you know it makes no difference.
And then and particularly bothers you just as a rational person, but as an educator also who's devoted your life to these
even
issues.
as an academician, when I'm doing great work typing at my computer, heaven only knows what I'm wearing or not. That is very different than when I go out in public.
Okay.
So I personally know that what you have on has nothing to do with whether or not you're academically astute or whether or not you're socially and emotionally mature.
Can you listen to the Tom Ficklin Show? And Jonathan Berryman is with us, and I'm glad you referenced Bubba. I'm sorry, President. President. Well, his wife was here on Sunday. But what's it? Clinton is his name, right? Okay. What's the first name? Not George Clinton. George retired. George is retired.
William Jefferson.
William Jefferson Clinton. I'm sorry. And I'm really glad you referenced his name in terms of I've had several people on the show that have talked about policy and practice, and even looking at definition of abolitionism and how that was impacted, and how the Britain kind of eliminated the slave trade, but it was also for profit seeking to kind of create new markets. So how policy affects us in so many ways, and for Clinton, not George, but Bill, to reference the in his State of the Union address. I mean, that State of the Union address, just as in the sidebar, there's 10, 15, 20, 30 iterations and drafts for your State of the Union. I mean, it's, except for the one that was most recently given, but that's a digression. I'm not sure there was even a draft of that. But the State of the Union address is typically to be really a historic document that historians will look back on, compare administrations, talk about policies, what was implemented. So this is not a casual thing for our president of the time, William Jefferson Clinton, to reference this. And again, there was a reason. Do you know whether this was his first or his second? I mean, was it? He's there for 2 terms. I'm just curious. Was
the second one, 1996?
So it was the second. So okay. So even there, so he'd given some thought to it. I mean, this was something that he'd seen in terms of his administration and his historical mark on presidential legacy. So this was key.
So, I believe is a well-intentioned comment that oftentimes you can have a great idea for policy, but then the implementation of it is not so great.
And we know, like, leave no child behind, et cetera. So we can see how presidents and secretaries of education, and also federal education policy versus local implementation and jurisdictions, there's often a conflict. But we're here locally with Tom Ficklin. Joe Jonathan is with us. Our local Board of Education meetings are every 2 weeks, and Darnell Goldson is the chair, and others on the board. They've been really increasingly transparent as far as I can tell, and information is available. I've had some of the parent groups, leadership groups on the show. So it's important as we celebrate people commencing this year in 2018. Another batch, another people will be moving up in September in terms of school resuming, and also the summer school. So education is really a 12-month enterprise, and particularly for our youth these days, we understand that there's so much fake news, and I would dare say, Jonathan, even fake education. So we really got to be on top of what's occurring here, and to be aware of something that might be as simplistic or as trivial as school uniforms. It's really not. If the President of the United States at one point thought it was important, that should give you a little clue.
And even that was a different era. That was 22 years ago. We've made so many great strides in better understanding what qualitative education now looks like. We've done a myriad of things to increase school safety. Certainly things with cameras and improved safety measures of how people enter buildings and exit buildings, and ID badges and all kinds of things. And then in terms of making sure that we provide a quality education, we now have performance indicators and rubrics that help us to understand what qualitative education looks like.
See, important. Yes, and really key.
And coaching, and how to build really a better climate. How do you handle instructional leadership? What does talent management look like? What does organizational management look like? How do you engage families and students and teachers and other stakeholders in the community in building a positive climate and culture for your school? That information is already there.
See? Excellent. And share with folks a little tips about when you say it's always there. Information is available. I certainly agree with you. How might should there any particular websites you'd recommend, or the City of New Haven's or the public school system's website to or talk to their principal or their local alderperson? How would you kind of direct them if someone really wants to kind of gather?
So if they really want to look at how we evaluate it, there's certainly the state has it available. What is it, SDE.gov, or Google the Connecticut State Department of Education, and it can take you there, and you look for the Connecticut Leader Support Rubrics 2015.
Good.
And that gives a general overview of what you can expect administrators to do. New Haven has its own TVAL system, which we can certainly get from the Board of Ed, that details how our administrators are evaluated, how our teachers are evaluated, how our social workers, how everybody who works in the district is evaluated in some way, shape, or form.
Excellent.
And it gives you exactly what their job should look like, from those who are needs improvement to those who are level 5 exemplary.
Key, excellent. And as we know, soon we'll have always each year there's some shifts in terms of principals and leadership at the various schools. So I suppose that information will be made available relatively soon in terms of Superintendent Burks' decisions from a personnel standpoint. I want to shift as we kind of conclude, Jonathan, not totally, but somewhat. We hadn't really discussed this previously, but I think you can rise to the challenge in answering the question. For parents that are, because this is a question that's been on my mind, for parents that are understanding the school is now kind of coming to an end, they may or may not be concerned about their young son or daughter's performance, but say in the 5th grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, what possibly could they be doing this summer to kind of not have that summer? We hear a lot about this summer slide back, where the gap between the end of the summer and then the end of school summer and then resuming, that students sometimes lose their academic performance measures with the summer gap kind of thing, summer vacation. If you're a concerned parent, what can you do, if anything, for your son or daughter that might be in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, doesn't matter the grade, to kind of keep him or her inspired for the summer, to kind of maximize the summer learning experiential opportunity?
So learning takes place in a lot of ways. Certainly we encourage all parents to read, to encourage their children to read, continue reading, talk to your children, find out where their minds are, ask them what they think about what their opinion is and why. So one of the things that I see is our students need more experience with being able to justify their answers and connecting those answers to evidence. What about this? What about
so
that?
let's role play. I'll pretend I'm a 12-year-old or something. You pretend you're my father.
So, why did you wear what you have? Why did you wear what you're wearing?
All my friends do, Dad.
Okay, so why did you wear it?
I don't know. I mean, all my friends do. I just and the girls like it too. I think the girls like it. I heard my boyfriend, my best friend said that his girlfriend said, "Oh, I like that." So I'm just, I guess I want a girlfriend.
So you think that outfit will get you one?
I hope so. I haven't had any success thus far.
So there's your evidence. What would you ideally wear?
And you dress nice, Dad, too. Ideally, I don't know. Why don't you take me shopping and we'll pick out some things.
That's not a bad idea.
All right.
I know when I was a child, we used to look at catalogs, which probably don't exist anymore, and fold down the pages of the things we wanted. But we continue to encourage imagination.
See,
and and encourage your children to explain
Indeed.
why they are imagining in that way.
Indeed.
What I find is our students are very resourceful. They're very intelligent. In many cases, they're very articulate. They like to talk. They will express their ideas. What oftentimes they need is somebody to engage them in those ideas.
And just in that little 40-second thing we did there, there's and what I hear you saying, and this we've heard people say this from time and time again, but I really deeply and sincerely believe it's true. There are learning opportunities every moment of the day in chatting with them. There's learning opportunities just as on the planet, but particularly with your young people. So just in that episode, if you had a computer at home, you could go on a computer and look at a GQ thing. You could look at various fashions. So it doesn't matter. So I hear you saying whatever the student says or the child says to you, there's substance there. There's something that's on his or her mind that you want to share, and they can reflect with an adult also.
Absolutely, and that we provide more of those experiences. If you live in the Hill, go visit Fairhaven. Go visit a part of New Haven you haven't seen. Take advantage of some of our resources right here in downtown New Haven. Go to the museums. Walk down Chapel Street. Look at the construction going on.
Yes.
Look at the differences at buildings and talk about how they're the same and different. Visit City Hall. Find out how our government, who is the mayor? Where's the mayor's office? Who are these other people hanging on the wall? What are these other offices in here?
Yes, definitely.
Explore.
Definitely. We have the various international pop-up festivals kind of occurring, and the international festivals coming up, and obviously the Freddie Fixer will be rescheduled. But yeah, there's so much, and I appreciate you sharing that, because that might sound mundane and simple, but as I chat with young people, I always ask young people, Jonathan, as we kind of wind down, to rate who's your best teacher. I've asked this question maybe 200 times, literally over the last 10 years. To any young person that I have a chance to chat with who's between kindergarten and 10th grade. Who's your favorite teacher? They'll automatically give me an answer. Who's the worst teacher? Then they'll look at me because they're concerned about, well, is he going to spy on me? And I'll rephrase it, and I'll rephrase it and say, what teacher, in your opinion, needs to improve him or herself? Invariably, within 5 seconds, regardless of whether you're a 5-year-old or a 15-year-old person, they will respond about what teacher needs to improve him or herself. Then I'll ask, what do they need to improve on? And they'll say, from their galaxy of perception, what needs to be improved. So they have opinions, they have thoughts. Their brain the brain cells are communicating with one another. And let's just engage and commune with their life.
Absolutely. That's a huge part of how education now is shifting. It's shifting away from compliance, which uniforms definitely are a part of, and shifting toward engagement, which asks questions. What are you interested in?
Yes.
What are some opportunities that you can pursue? Well, if you wear this suit, if you're wearing that color, what else might you consider wearing? Where's that style of dress coming from? What else? What other clothing era does it refer to?
Yes, the history. There's history in everything. Yes.
Right. So we engage people in explaining their choices, and use those as entry points in which to teach.
Indeed.
I think mandating a uniform and insisting on compliance is a low level skill. And it leaves students at knowing what to wear rather than engaging them in the process of how to dress.
Good point. You're listening to the Tom Ficklin Show. We're winding down, and Jonathan, I'm going to give you Jonathan. Quinn Berryman is here, over 20 years, 2 decades of working in the New Haven public school system and other school systems. I want to give you the last word, Jonathan. I really appreciate your being here. Just before we kind of wind down, any thing that we might have, there's, again, you're going to come back, so there's certainly things we haven't covered every aspect of our preliminary discussions, but just wonder whether there are any points that you mentioned here that we haven't had a chance to.
Well, and I want to reiterate that these are my ideas, that they do not reflect the thoughts of any of my employers, but my viewpoints on social equity certainly are shaped by my being a descendant of slaves. The grandchild of people who witnessed and lived through the codification, institutionalization, and enforcement of Jim Crow laws. I'm the child of parents who were born into segregation, who, along with others in their generation, were tasked with being first in the integration of military schools, universities, industry, and the world at large. And my parents instilled in me and all of their children the importance of education and the continual need to speak truth to power and to model best practices, even when people don't want to hear it or see it. So that's part of the reason I'm here today.
Yes, and I really appreciate and thank you for the. Hopefully there's no penalty in your being here, but it does take courage to speak out. It takes courage to speak out. So whoever's listening, please exercise your freedom. And you've talked about liberation, and freedom has always been a theme throughout human history, and perhaps now more than ever we need to kind of really embody, embrace, and exercise not only your 4 freedoms, but every freedom you can think of. It's very important. Freedom and accountability obviously come together. But I want to thank you, Jonathan, for kind of being with us. You're going to come back on the show. We're going to talk about the Heritage Chorale again.
Sure.
We're going to play some music. We're going to talk about you're also a musical minister in Macedonia. Messiah Baptist Church, and you've been a musical minister at Emmanuel, and where else? At Varick
and Community Baptist Church.
So we're going to talk about that Black religious experience from the musical standpoint. Liturgy we're going to talk about. So you're just going to become a regular basically on the show. That's what I'm trying to kind of prepare you for. But whether it's in school or out of school, education takes place so many ways. We know about many of our, you referenced our historical DNA. Many of our schools first started out of churches kind of thing. So we don't want to lose sight of that as well. And there's just so much for us to kind of understand and believe as we create harmony in schools, harmony in New Haven, harmony in the state, harmony in the nation, and harmony in the world. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, Tom.
And chat with you next Monday, everybody.
Yeah. As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission, I'ma roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going, better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gon' be counting blessings.